my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. This side. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will open. I know this rose will open.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Watkins. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a worship associate of this congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. We acknowledge that we are gathering on the original lands of the Erie, the Haudenosaunee, and the Nishinabek peoples, also known as the Three Fires Council. We recognize the need to learn more about these complex and sometimes painful histories, to care for the land we inhabit, and to show respect for the diverse peoples and cultures who preceded us, as well as those who gather here now. Our congregation is working to build relationship with the Lake Erie Native American Council as a way of living into these words. It's good to be with you this morning. Welcome. We come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, different ages, and different backgrounds. Welcome. We come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of our bigger questions. We hope that you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. Whatever your age, young or old or somewhere between, whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, know that you are welcome here. We especially welcome any guests who are worshiping with us for the first time today, either here with us physically or joining us in the cyber world. If you're interested in learning more information about who we are, we invite you to fill out one of the guest cards in the pew rack in front of you, and you can place that in the offering plate when it comes around later in the service, and we'll be able to reach out to you and answer any questions you may have. If you're watching from an internet platform, you can go to our website, uucleveland.org, or send us an email. We are about to enter into sacred space. Please take a moment to silence your phones or any other electronics that beep. As we light our chalice, please join me in reciting the words of our congregational covenant, which can be found on the yellow cards in the pew rack in front of you. We cultivate trust with one another by celebrating differences, honoring boundaries, and offering compassion and care. We listen to each other deeply with curiosity and wonder. We speak ourselves without need to defend ourselves or persuade each other. We create safe and brave space for healthy conflict, creativity, and fun. We reconcile through forgiving and making amends when we hurt one another.
Good morning. My name is Jacquie Zarley, and I use she, they pronouns. And this morning, I'd like to share with you something from Jade Kaiser. Maybe we try something queerer this year. Far more strange. Not mere counter resolutions, but odder intentions altogether. Ones that disturb predictable patterns, problematize all the collective routines that keep us in a destructive loop, year after year. Let's toss out the colonizing life maps of our bodies, lives, and lands, histories, and futures. Choose to wander in weirder directions. Give up the old, tired scripts. speak in tongues of flesh, squawks and grunts and howls and moans. Ancient animal utterances bubbling up from within, angry and tired, hopeful and alive. Language unintelligible to all deadening rationality. Yes, it's a peculiar suggestion. But normal is severing us from humanity. Success is destroying life on the planet. Hustle is running us into the ground. The last thing we need is more winners in this game. Let us be people who strive to fail the test of domination. Companioning each other in the consequences of non-conformity and unearthing the joy of a more feral way. This year, may we trust in the wisdom of the fierce, free, and freaky. Too creative to be contained, too bizarre to fit standard molds of exploitation. Too unusual to lead us toward the familiar dead ends. Cheers to unhinged dreaming, absurd acts of solidarity and care, and utterly foolish faith in the mysterious love of a wild world that desperately wants us to live. And now we take time and we invite you to take a moment, and if you're comfortable and willing, please say hello to your neighbor, greet your neighbor, and then we will sing hymn number 1053 in your gray hymnal, or the words are in your, there. Oh, teal, never mind. I knew that. I was just checking to see if you guys knew that. Try to catch you off guard. Oh, I'm sorry. And remember, there are crayons and scissors in your, did you want to say it? I feel like I'm sounding a little nervous. I have to. So we take time each week to remember that each of us didn't just appear here Sunday. We came from our lives and our busyness, and we have things that happen, joys, and we have sadnesses and concerns. And so at this time, we take this time to share our joys and concerns. We invite you to come forward and put a stone in the glass container to represent your joy and your concern. So if you're here, if you've been here forever or you're here for the very first time, we invite you to come forward and place a stone into the glass bowl. take a moment to acknowledge all of the joys and sadness, the concerns, the excitements. And we take a moment for those who didn't come forward, who have joys and concerns. And from our book, we have a healing prayer to an unnamed member who's working with medical professionals to deal with a concerning health issue. And Carol Gibson is in rehab after dislocating her new hip. So we just hold space for her. And it is so. Jenny wanted me to take a moment to remind you and let you know that there are crayons and scissors in your pews. If you open up your order of service, there's a little butterfly that you can color and cut out, and it will go with Jenny's story today. So, just in time for stillness.
Good morning. My name is Jenny Papp. I'm the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here in this congregation. I wanted to tell you a story today that really goes with our opening hymn. It's just one of my most favorite hymns, and I've been listening to it on repeat all morning to get in the mood. The story is about a young person named Norman. And this is Norman. So Norman had always been normal. Perfectly normal, normal nonetheless. Until one day, he grew a pair of wings. Now, Norman had imagined growing taller. He had imagined that perhaps he might grow a beard someday, like his father. But he had really never quite imagined that he would grow wings. I can understand that. So, still, here they were now, with these beautiful, delightful, colorful wings, and he decided that he was going to try them out right now, because why not, right? And so he swooped, and he soared, and he went all through the air. But then he had to go home for dinner. Was not entirely sure how his parents were going to feel about this. So many pockets. So Norman got out his coat, and he squished his wings in there, squished them all up, put his big, heavy coat on, and you can't keep those wings out back, can you? Put his big, heavy coat on, and he said, this is what I need to do because my parents have always thought that I was so normal. How will they feel about this? And they did not notice his wings. He squished them in there pretty well. They didn't notice his wings, but they did think it was kind of odd that he was wearing his coat all through dinner. It made bath time a little awkward. Bedtime was problematic. It was hot and uncomfortable. But he had decided that no one should see his wings ever. No one. So the next day, Norman went to the park, and it really made this hard to play his favorite games. This big, heavy coat on. And it was too hot. But that's what he was going to do. So it went on. Swimming was just weird. Long car journeys were unbearable. I can see from some of you probably church service would have been quite uncomfortable with this heavy coat on. The only time that Norman could feel normal was when it rained, because then that coat was entirely appropriate. Well, one day, a boy tried to pull his coat off, and Norman had to run away, and he was so mad, angry, as he should have been, hot-faced. He wished he'd never grown these stupid wings. It's dumb. I don't want them. I don't want to be like this. But then he saw some birds flying up in the sky, and he remembered what that had been, how joyful it had been when he had flown. And then it occurred to him, it wasn't the wings that were making him miserable, it was that coat that was making him miserable. So, got rid of it. Had to fluff his wings a little after that. But then it was time to go home. He was like, yeah, still not ready for this. So he had kind of been flying around in the field by himself, but not ready. So he went home, and his parents looked at him, and they said, why don't you take that hot and stuffy coat off? It's okay. And he's like, really? You sure? And they said, of course. How could you be anything less than beautiful? Go ahead, take it off. So he did, and he let his wings span out, and he flew up in the air, and he felt like he was not going to pick it up anymore. He was free of his coat, and as he flew around, he noticed some other children with their thick, heavy coats on the ground, looking up at him. And then one took off their coat. Is there one here that's taken off their coat yet? Do we have any other butterflies in here yet? There's one back there. There's a couple back there. And they all started flying joyfully through the air. By the end of the service, we should have a whole, a flock of butterflies? Okay? They started flying joyfully through the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. All these lovely, beautiful people. And Norman had never felt so happy. And that is when Norman realized that there was no such thing as perfectly normal. But he was perfectly Norman. And that was just as it should be. Thank you so much for sharing a little story with me today. May it be so.
Our offering partner today is See You at the Top. Children need more than just food, clothing, and shelter. They also need time in nature. For some in Northeast Ohio, though, that's almost a luxury. They may have the basics of life, but are missing or don't feel welcome to take part in what others around the region routinely enjoy and probably take for granted: abundant time outdoors. What's more, they're paying the price in the form of chronic stress, physical and behavioral health issues, and reinforced negative stereotypes. Ebony Hood, co-founder of See You at the Top, believes strongly in the power of the outdoors, but has a separate, parallel objective. With her group, she's striving not only to promote time in nature, but also to demolish racial barriers and encouraging broader participation in a wide range of sports and other healthy activities. See You at the Top, founded in 2009, grew from a desire to expose youth to challenging skilled sports. During the winter of 2010, they took youth to a local ski resort for a series of ski lessons. At the end, they received an overwhelming response of, "What's next?" For See You at the Top, it's equally a matter of representation. Hood says, "We figure it's so important to put ourselves in spaces where you don't normally see us, in order to challenge those around us and inspire more people to get outside." To support this important work, I encourage you to give generously and within your means as the offering plates are passed, or through Cash App with the cash tag of $UUCC44122. Be sure to put today's date and SYATT in the foreline of the app. Let Your Body Tell the Truth by Gretchen Haley. Come now across platforms and practices to declare with joy our resilience, to proclaim on purpose we have survived the pandemics of our time. We have survived, we are surviving. We have pivoted and we have planned and then replanned, and then thrown all the plans to the wind. In this circle, we will say without shame, some days we lost our ways and our passwords, and we have not always been our best selves. We are learning, and not always quickly. To regroup and remember perfection was never the point. We are here because we long to try again, to promise with people to be partners in this long-haul work of loving and becoming. Even while we grieve also the cost, which is not small and lingers in our hearts and turns only sometimes to rage. Here, let your body tell the truth. Shake free the stories that live in your skin. Breathe in your beauty and breathe out your burdens. Breathe in our beauty. Breathe out our burdens. Be here with it all, with all of us, in the freedom of this new day. The storm is passing over. The sun is breaking through. This new day dawns for us all. Come, let us worship together.
The poor duckling did not know where he dared stand or where he dared walk. He was so sad because he was so desperately ugly. And because he was the laughingstock of the whole barnyard. That is, of course, from, can anyone tell me? The Ugly Duckling. Right. Hans Christian Andersen. Have any of you felt connection with the Ugly Duckling? I absolutely connected with the Ugly Duckling as well as many other of Hans Christian Andersen's stories. Do you know Hans was a Unitarian? I connected with the idea of not fitting in, of not knowing how to behave, not knowing where to stand and where to walk. I understood that feeling of walking around the barnyard and everyone had something. Everyone had friends, everyone had connections, but I never really did. And so I connected very much. I connected very much with the Ugly Duckling. And if Hans Christian Andersen had a very good handle on this concept of being the out person, the person that didn't fit in, the person that didn't relate. You know, in almost every one of his stories, there was a character that didn't fit in, and everyone bullied, and everyone made fun of. And despite the Disney-ification of many of his stories, most of Hans Christian's fairy tales ended really awful, with like a terrible, terrible ending. And somehow I related to that too. But as I got older, I learned more about Hans Christian Andersen. And I can attest to some of the groans that people let out when I said he was a Unitarian. Because Hans, by all accounts, he had a horrible childhood. His family, his mother was a prostitute. His father died when he was 12. And he, by all accounts, was unattractive. He was tall and gangly, had a big nose and big feet. He was a terrible student. He was bullied and made fun of. And in his autobiography, though, you would have thought he was the most wonderful person in the world. He talked about all of the wonderful things that he did, and he talked about his wonderful childhood and how happy he was. The first line of his autobiography, which is called The Fairy Tale of My Life, which makes sense. My life is a lovely story, happy and full of incident. And then he goes on to say that if a good fairy came down and gave me everything I wished for, everything I wanted in life, my life could not have been better. The history of my life, he goes on to say, will say to the world what it says to me. There is a loving God. So the truth is, Hans's fairy tales were more autobiographic than his actual autobiography. And I relate to this. I related to this need to create a story of my life that reflected normal, that reflected that I fit in, that I was okay, that I'm fine. But I was always weird. I was a weird kid. And I never fit in, and I struggled. And what I didn't know, and certainly Hans didn't know, was that we were tap dancing on a little spectrum called the ADHD autism spectrum. And certainly Hans didn't know it in his time. No one knew it then. Our ancestors didn't know it. Our grandparents, the entire boomer generation didn't know about neurodiversity, autism, ADHD. And if you ask someone in their 70s or 80s, was anyone in your class or is there anyone in your family that has ADHD or autism? They would have said, no, we never heard of that. That's not a thing. But if you ask them about that weird kid in the classroom, or the crazy cat lady, or the weird person in town, oh, that's just Joe. He just walks around and carries a log with him, right? They would know that there were people like that. The thing that made Hans and I so different, this thing called neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, it would not appear in the diagnostic manuals until I was in my 30s. I was married and I had a child, and I remember hearing about it. I remember hearing about it on the news and, in different classes. And it was only considered to be in young boys, right? Young boys who caused lots of disruption in the classroom. They had difficulty sitting still and communicating and making eye contact. That wasn't me. I was just weird. I was weird. I had weird interests. I dressed weird. And we were not super wealthy, so I was the kid with the too big or too small hand-me-down clothes and the taped-up glasses and the cape. I was that kid. And I never understood anything anything in school. I struggled to follow concepts. I struggled with math. Oh, math. To this day, I struggle with math, understanding the concept. The concept of time eludes me, has always eluded me. To this day, I struggle to tell time on an analog clock. I struggled to make friends. I was so incredibly shy. I never went on dates, certainly did not have a social life in high school. And I've always questioned my sexuality and my gender identity. And so I never knew how to dress. I never knew how to behave. I never knew who I was really interested in. So, and then I managed to graduate from college somehow on a diet of fingernails and coffee. And I graduated with, are you ready? I graduated with a degree in philosophy. You know, the most useful of all degrees. And then after college, I'd had enough peopling, enough trying to fit in. And I was introduced to a man, and I thought, okay, that's what's wrong. I just need to get married and have a kid and just be normal, fit in, right? So I got married to my partner, Carlin, and we were married in '95, and we had a daughter. And I put on the mask of parenthood, of motherhood, of the wife, the caretaker, and I was good. I was good. I was a mom. I was a good mom. I was the best mom ever. Because I had to be, because that was the mask. I didn't really have a lot of friends, not a lot of interests other than mom. I'm the mom. I'm the best mom. I'm the perfect mom, and this is the perfect kid. And in 2015, well, actually, let me step back a little. I began to go to a UU church. Started finding myself a little bit, finding that, you know, I really would love to be a UU minister. And in little tiny increments, I began my journey. And in 2015, I came out as gay to my family and my friends, to no one's surprise. And I thought, that's it. That's why I feel so weird. That's why I feel so different, because I'm not really being my true, authentic self. That's it. So I came out. My husband and I, we reevaluated our marriage, and we decided that it needed to be a little different to reflect this relationship. And so I moved out of our shared bedroom and began exploring my sexuality and my gender identity. And taking off that mask was so freeing. And I thought, that's it. I just need to be my authentic self. And then one day I got a postcard in the mail from the Methodist Theological Seminary in Ohio. And I thought, yeah, maybe I can be a minister. And so I enrolled. The 3 years at MTSO were an amazing experience. I was still weird and awkward. I had imposter syndrome so bad that I literally hid from the dean for the first year because I was sure she was going to come up to me and say, "Ooh, sorry, we made a mistake. You don't belong here." I fell out of my chair at least once a semester. I struggled to grasp the concepts. Does anyone understand the Trinity? I remember being in a theology class and just struggling, trying so hard to get that concept. And I said to the professor, is it like the concept of mind, body, and spirit in our lives? And she, in front of the entire class, looked at me and said, no. Just like that, like, no. So I struggled. I struggled with that. But I managed to graduate with fairly good grades. And I thought, okay, all right, I graduated, I've done my training, I can do this, I can be a minister. And then I began a one-year internship with a fabulous minister. Some of you may know Susan Ritchie. I was so privileged to get to do a whole year internship with her and her incredible, loving congregation. They were just so kind, and this is where I discovered that I was wrong. I didn't have what it takes to be a minister. I struggled with executive function things, keeping track of schedules and meetings. I struggled not to be weird and awkward in meetings, and I just had a really hard time setting up things and setting classes and being on time, and I didn't know what was wrong. Why can't I handle this? I'm an adult. Why can't I handle this? And then I found out about neurodivergence the way everyone does on TikTok. So don't knock it. I'll tell you what. I would have never known. I would have never connected if I hadn't had an opportunity to hear from the entire world, right? So that's one thing about being on that is you begin to hear yourself, you begin to see yourself and other people, and you think, wow. So my minister and my internship committee persuaded me to get a diagnosis. Just go get a diagnosis. So if you are a child, if you are 9, it's easy to get a diagnosis. If you are 60, it's a little bit more difficult. And I don't mean like Wordle difficult. I mean like climbing Mount Everest difficult. It took months. I was on a waiting list for 6 months to be evaluated, and at the very last minute, when they finally called me to schedule my assessment, they were like, "Oh, darn it, we don't assess anyone under 50." And I was like, so where do people, what happens? Do they not grow up? Do people not become 50? And she said, no, we just assume that by 50 you figured it out. Clearly I had. And then through a friend of a friend, I was introduced to Dr. Christine Henry online. She's in Texas, and she works with adults who have neurodivergence, and she does an assessment. It was fabulous. And it turns out after all the assessment, the grueling questionnaires and therapy sessions, that I got a diagnosis of severe ADHD, and I'm on the autism spectrum. So, okay, so you have ADHD and autism. So first there was the validation of, see, I knew something was wrong. I knew I wasn't slow or stupid or lazy. I knew there was something different. And then there's redemption. And this one caught me really off guard. But we don't talk about redemption much here in UU. The action of saving or being saved from sin, error, and evil. How often had I thought that I was unworthy, that there was something wrong, something broken in me that did not deserve love, that did not deserve healing. But I'm innocent. I'm innocent of all charges. I'm innocent. I just think differently. And it was like someone being freed from prison after many years of being in prison for something they didn't do. There's this sense of redemption. I'm innocent, innocent. And then, wait a minute. The more I think, the more I look back on my life, I began to feel anger and rage. Are you kidding me? The adults that punished, the kids that bullied and excluded. Do you know that researchers have estimated that by the age of 10, undiagnosed kids with ADHD and autism receive 20,000 more negative messages and critiques than those kids without ADHD and autism? And imagine 20,000 more negative comments. Over the course of 10 years, that's more than 5 negative comments per day, more than their neurotypical peers. Imagine that multiplied by 60 years. And then came the grief. I had to let go. I had to let go of the life that I thought I wanted to have. All of the things that I thought I was going to do in my life. And if only I had had someone, if I had known, things could have been different. I could have done things differently if I had had accommodations, if I had had help, if I wasn't being punished, if I wasn't being judged, if I had not been critiqued for everything as a child, if I wasn't told that I was lazy and unworthy. I had to grieve the imaginary tale of my life, the imaginary autobiography. How do I begin to make meaning in my life now, at age 60, knowing that everything I've ever thought about myself in the world is wrong? How do I let go of all of the abuses, the bullying, the punishments, the shame? I don't know. I'm in that process. And I think that this will be my new spiritual path for perhaps the rest of my life. For now, it remains unfinished business. One thing that I did learn in my studies, and as I learned more and more about this, is that both ADHD and autism are highly inheritable. There's growing evidence that there are certain gene markers for both ADHD and autism that we are born with. And I started thinking about my family. Now, I'd always known that my family was a little wild and weird. And I recently sat down with my mother not too long ago, and we were looking through an old family album. And she was sharing stories about each of the members of the family. You know, that's my Uncle John. He lived in a cabin in the woods, and we didn't see much of him. Oh, that's Grandma Jenny. She slipped and fell in grocery stores for a living. And there's my cousin Betty, who had the largest green glass collection in the state. This is Uncle Billy. For some reason, he wasn't allowed to come around. And finally, the light dawned over Marblehead. I was raised by neurodiverse people who were raised by neurodiverse people who were raised by neurodiverse people. They didn't know. How could they know? Do you think neurodiversity is new? Now in the United States today, 1 in 68 children has ADHD or autism. That's a lot. Is that because they're just suddenly being born with ADHD and autism? Is it because doctors are paying more attention? Is it a trend? Is it TikTok? Is it vaccines? What if it's always been that way? What if 1 in 68 people, what if 1 in 68 baby boomers had or has ADHD or autism? 1 in 68 Gen Xers. We, the people of my age who are just now finding out, we're that lost generation. We are the 68%, 1 in 68 of our generation. And we're mostly undiagnosed. And we're beginning to unmask. And it's time to batten down the hatches and prepare our caring community, our doctors, our nurses, our hospice workers. The medical community, particularly in the United States, is astonishingly, they know astonishingly little about neurodiverse elders. Many U.S. medical and nursing facilities literally dismiss the idea that an elderly person can be neurodiverse, can have ADHD or autism. In 2011, a study showed that 14 out of 141 people in a Pennsylvania psychiatric hospital had undiagnosed autism or ADHD. And of those, all but 2 had been misdiagnosed as schizophrenic. And sadly, in spite of the belief that we have figured it out by the time we're 50, statistics are not kind to neurodiverse elders. 80% of undiagnosed neurodiverse people develop other separate illnesses and disorders, such as anxiety and depression and dysthymia. And that's sort of a low, continuous, long-term depression. So think of that elderly neighbor, get off my lawn, who hates people, who doesn't, there could be autism or ADHD involved. Neurodiverse people do not age well compared to their neurotypical peers. They often become very isolated. Think about that dysthymia or dysthemia. They neglect their own hygiene as well as the space around them. And hoarding is often a comorbidity. Neurodivergent elders are more likely to have family estrangements, social conflict in relationships, and they have health issues because they struggle to remember to take their medicine, to keep appointments, to do the things they need to care for themselves, and they're more likely to die at a younger age than their neurotypical peers. We didn't know. So here's the perfect example of Maya Angelou's quote, "Do the best you can until you know better, and then do better." Well, we're beginning to know. We're beginning to know that neurodiversity can happen at any age. And those of us who have reached our 60s and 50s and maybe even 70s without being diagnosed, we're heroes. We are heroes because we have found a way to survive in a world that isn't made for us, in a world that does not accommodate us. So, what can we do now that we know better? Well, just as we advocate for children, neurodiverse children, we have to advocate for our elders. We have to have more acceptance and understanding of neurodiversity, autism, ADHD. And we can learn about that. We can each learn about that. It's easy. Google. We can learn about it in ourselves and in our families. And those of you sitting here now who are wondering or questioning, one way to maybe give you a hint is, are your children or grandchildren being diagnosed with ADHD or autism? If so, it's heritable. So you might want to think about, let's take a look at this. And just as accommodations are made for neurodiverse children, we have to learn to accommodate the need for those older people with neurodiversities. And that can look like help with executive functions support, daily tasks, and taking medicine, and it can mean paying attention to sensory issues and environmental stimulus. It can mean acceptance of physical and verbal stimming, understand meltdowns and shutdowns. But most importantly, we, as friends and family, and maybe even as neurodiverse people ourselves, we have to work to change the negative stereotypes around having this disorder, the shame, the guilt. We have to make it part of our society. Neurodivergence is not something wrong with us. It's just a different way of thinking, right? And like it or not, we have to make way for an amazing, wonderful, weird, bumbling, brilliant, hilariously funny, and creative cohort of neurodivergent elders that is about to be in our care. Do you all remember the poem, When I'm an Old Woman? Where's my reader friend? Come on up here. This poem was written in 1961 by Jenny Joseph. She was only 28 years old. You want to just find a microphone? You got her? And I always loved the poem. It's kind of, I've always seen it as just sort of a little tongue-in-cheek commentary on society's rules. But then I read it recently after my own diagnosis. And I was like, this is not a normal old person. In fact, this is a perfect description of a neurospicy elder who has finally unmasked. Does anyone know the actual title of the poem? Wrong. The title of the poem is Warning. Warning. So, imagine for a moment that you are the caregiver of this old woman.
When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me.
Oh, sure, Mee-maw. You know, you go, you wear your purple and your red, you go, girl. You be you.
And I shall spend my pension on brandy, sandals, and say we've no money for butter.
Okay. Mee-maw is spending her money on weird clothing and alcohol instead of food. The grocery store and make sure that she has the things that she needs. Imagine the next part of the poem is your experience in the grocery store with Mee-maw.
I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired.
Oh, we're in the middle of the parking lot, sweetie. Please, let's get up. We can go sit over here at the bench. No, she's fine. She's not hurt. Just go around, buddy. Finally, we get inside the grocery store.
And I shall gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells.
Oh my gosh, Mee-maw, stop. You can't eat all of the samples. No, please don't push that button.
And run my stick along the public railings.
All of them, every single one. So we finally make it home.
And I shall make up for the sobriety of my youth.
Okay, Mee-maw, we know about the brandy. Let me pour you some and we'll get you off to bed.
I shall go out in my slippers in the rain.
Wake up. Your Mee-maw's out in the rain again.
And pick flowers in other people's gardens.
Oh, yes. Mrs. Williams, yes, I know it's the middle of the night, and I understand that these are your prize roses. Listen, I will gladly pay for any damages.
And I shall learn to spit.
So the next part of the poem shifts the narrative a little. And so instead of telling us what it'll be like for her to be old, she's now telling us what we can do as old people. So just imagine that you're sitting around in your 20s and 30s and you're sitting with Jenny. And Jenny says,
"You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat."
All right, here. Let's drink to growing fat.
And eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only eat bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes.
And then we have at the end of the poem the lament that every neurodiverse person feels about society forcing things on us.
But now we must have clothes that keep us dry.
We have to wear clothes.
And pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children.
Don't frighten the children.
We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I'm old and start to wear purple. Spoiler alert, no one will be shocked and surprised.
So let's sing again. Please stand as you're willing and able, and join us in singing hymn 323, Break Not the Circle, and this is in the gray hymnal.
A few announcements. This afternoon, we encourage you to come back to Fellowship Hall at 4:30 for a special multimedia program with Jim Scott entitled The Year to save the earth. The Our Whole Lives program registration continues this week. There will be more information in Fellowship Hall. And there we go. This Wednesday, the Journey 10-week spiritual development small group will get started. There's a little space remaining in that group. If you've been thinking about it, just email Reverend Randy to let them know that you want to be a part of that. As you've seen, the UUCC, the UU Climate Justice Revival is next weekend. Join at all congregation, all ages, all UU exploration of how can we help create the future we want to have. Learn more after church with a video and discussion by the stage in Fellowship Hall. And registration will be available there, online at the church website. If you're bringing children, please register them by today so we know what care that we need to provide. And finally, Youth Religious Exploration will be meeting today, right after service from 11:30 to 12:30. Spirit Play for kindergarten through grades 3 will be in room 104. Grades 4 to 6 will be in room 111. And grades 7 to 12 will be in room 201. Please be sure to escort the elementary children to their rooms. Don't just let them wander wild, please. And then children in kindergarten through grade 3, you need to come back and pick them up at the end as well.
Thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us this Sunday. And we hope that you've been blessed, and we would like you to know that we have been blessed by your presence. In closing, I would like to share a reading by Richard S. Gilbert. Life is always unfinished business. Life is always unfinished business. In the midst of the whirling day, in the hectic rush to be doing, in the frantic pace of life, pause here for a moment. Catch your breath. Relax your body. Loosen your grip on life. Consider that our lives are always unfinished business. Imagine that the picture of our being is never complete. Allow your life to be a work in progress. Do not hurry to mold the masterpiece. Don't rush to finish the picture. Don't be impatient to complete the drawing. From beckoning birth to dawning death, we are in process. And always there's more to be done. Don't let the incompleteness weigh on your spirit. Do not despair that imperfection marks your every day. Do not fear that we are still in the making. Let us instead be grateful that the world is still to be created. Let us give thanks that we can be more than we are, no matter what age. And let us celebrate the power of the incomplete, for life is always unfinished business.
Please join me in reciting the words of our Chalice extinguishing, which can be found on the yellow cards in the pew rack. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you. See you at 4:30 downstairs for Jim Scott. Special guests, me and Aaron Burkle will be there too. It's going to be a great program. Hope you can join us. Thank you, choir.